quite interesting that this council, which claims to have no money, has employed a private security company to go through people's personal bags, who purely and simply want to engage in observing the democratic processes of this Isle of Wight Council. Can I ask who made that decision, how much it has cost, and is this going to be the way in which public participation in the democratic processes of this island is going to be in the future? Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Brodie, the Chairman has invited me to respond.
Yeah.
Oh.
No. I've requested that Councillor Metcalfe, Mr Metcalfe responds. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie. The decision was taken after a conversation with our health and safety advisors internally within the council, after the incidents at the last council meeting when a number of councillors made comment to me about being concerned about banners that were being dropped over the balcony onto their heads. We also considered that we had the potential this evening for a large number of people to attend, and obviously space is limited in the gallery, so we initiated a proposal and a system to make sure that the people were in the gallery who wanted to be in the gallery for their appropriate items, so if it was for the petition or the fire service papers, so we had the right people in the gallery to observe what they came here to see. We needed to get SIA accredited security guards to be able to undertake the bag checks, because they have the right levels of insurance and training and are appropriate to be able to do that. So we've taken every decision on the basis of making sure that the meeting can proceed in a safe and proper manner, and we'll review the decision before each full council meeting. But it was taken after a number of representations made to me after the last meeting.
Councillor Brodie.
Aware, I suffer from epilepsy. This room is not a great room in terms of its lighting, etc. I have mentioned this in the past in meetings with the Chief Executive, and after a long period of time in this room, it does become quite difficult for me to be here. In November, I had to leave at 9 o'clock despite the extension, because I felt quite unwell and I thought I was going to have a petit mal, which is what I suffer from, and I'm desperately trying to stop having them, and I've succeeded over a reasonable period of time. This afternoon, I emailed you with a copy to the Chief Executive and the Monitoring Officer, asking for clarification if I am in a situation where I have to leave, even though my motions still haven't been discussed, because it is, in my view, institutional discrimination for me to not be able to move my motions because you keep extending the length of these meetings, because they're not as frequent as they should be. We only have 6 a year now. So as an epileptic, as somebody with a disability, I feel discriminated against. Now, Mr Metcalfe, I keep saying it again, don't I? Mr Metcalfe has leapt into action on the banners, but has entirely failed, along with Mrs Miles, the monitoring officer, to respond to my request about that. So I'm entirely unaware what my situation will be at 9 o'clock. So if you're going to concentrate on health and safety of members, why isn't the health and safety of a member of the opposition not also being treated with? Thank you very much, Chair.
I clarify, Councillor Brodie, that if you do leave at 9 o'clock before we get to your motion, then it's in order for someone else to put the motion. If you do need to leave the meeting at 9 o'clock or before we've got to your motion, then it's in order for someone else to put the motion for you.
Okay, moving on to item number 2, declarations of interest, please. Councillor Stewart.
As Chair, there's an item on the agenda relating to pay. A member of my family work for the council. I shall leave the room at that time. I think it's appropriate for me to do so.
Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chair. There are 2 items on the agenda relating to the Law Centre. I would like to declare that I am a trustee of the Law Centre, but it is a non-pecuniary role. Thank you.
Councillor Lilly.
I wish to declare an interest in item 10A. My wife is an employee of the council. Obviously, her income relates to mine, so I will leave the council chamber at that item. Okay.
Councillor Jones-Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. In item 4, the petition for Newport parking, I'm Vice Chairman of Newport Business Association and have a business in Newport. And also item 11, the motion regarding Newport parking. Thank you.
Councillor Rodney Downer.
Thank you, Chairman. A little bit of advice, please. My wife works at Wroxall Preschool, so will I have to leave the room?
Councillor Downer, I'm not sure whether it's a council preschool. If it's a council preschool, then it will be caught by the pay policy. If it's a preschool run by another organisation, then it won't.
Thank you. I will leave the room then because it's... Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Barry.
Is the advice then that anybody with a relative who works for the council should leave the room? Is that the advice you're giving us?
No, those who are declaring a pecuniary interest are doing so because a spouse or partner who has declared an interest on their register works for the Isle of Wight Council. So where that's the case, then in that case, it's a pecuniary interest.
Councillor Axford.
I declare an interest on item 4, the Newport parking, and the motion by Jeff Brodie, as I have a property in Node Hill.
Councillor Brading.
Yeah, on motion, agenda item 10A, my wife also works in the council school, so I will leave the chamber as well.
Okay, so we move on to item 3, which is to deal with any questions from members of the public. A maximum of 15 minutes for written questions. So, Tanya Rebel.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Yeah? Good. It has come to my attention that employees moving into County Hall from this March will be working from laptops and thus deploying wireless as the main form of electronic communication. Is the Council aware that RF electromagnetic field radiation has been classified by WHO as a 2B carcinogen, and that it has been linked in numerous studies to increased risk of diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and cancer, as well as disturbance of the navigational compass of birds and bees?
Tanya, speaking on behalf of the Council, nice to see you. Thank you for your question. Any staff moves are subject to a full health and safety risk assessment. In their normal line of work, appropriate staff at the Council, particularly those whose jobs involve working remotely, are offered the choice of plugging in, sounds painful that, doesn't it, and using the wireless connection. Any changes to our working arrangements at County Hall, or indeed elsewhere, will maintain those principles of health and safety, as these are paramount, and a choice between plug-in and remote working is the option we have. The Council maintains an overview of all key information and guidance relating to workplace health, and I can confirm that we are fully compliant with all requirements regarding health and safety in connection with this matter.
Thank you. Can I do a follow-up? Yes? Supplementary. I'm glad Council is taking this seriously, as in offering a choice, but I still ask the Council to rethink the fact that there's so much unwired Wi-Fi connection in Council chamber, because wired connections are far safer for public health and environment. We all know that austerity and cuts kill, also can electromagnetic radiation, albeit not as fast. It's serious stuff. So please can you look into this, and please can you protect your employees? Thank you.
Sorry, I missed the last sentence. Was it and protect our employees? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for that.
As well as the residents of this island as a whole.
No, thank you for clarifying that. Thank you.
Okay, so we move on now to oral questions. Could I ask Nick Stewart to come up and speak, please?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for taking time to listen. I apologise previously for not having put a written question in. It wasn't possible in the time that I had available, so I will keep this simple. I understand that the £90 million investment by the council using borrowed money from the government was then invested off the island. I've subsequently discovered and in a combined council meeting of the two COWS councils, they were told that it was impossible to find investment opportunities on the island, which is surprising. Could the council inform us, does the council have a policy to look at investment on the island, and have they instructed the council investment advisors accordingly?
Thank you for your question, Nick. Just confirm we're not related, but it's a good name you've got. I'll pass that to the Deputy Leader to answer, because he deals with that specifically.
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that we look at all investment opportunities that fit our very strict parameters. The key thing is to get the most return that we can, and to make sure that we have security and low-risk investments. I can confirm that amongst other investments, we have actually looked at one here on the island. Unfortunately, it didn't meet our strict criteria, and so we didn't invest, and that refusal to invest was subsequently proven to be correct, because that particular investment is no longer successful.
Thank you for that answer. Can I ask one supplementary very briefly? Can I just confirm that you just said that there is no key policy to invest on the island?
We take investments everywhere, and the island is treated exactly the same way as the rest of the UK. We've looked at probably a dozen or more investments, and you can see that we have been able to make very few. So if in the whole of the country very few come up, the likelihood of appropriate ones arising on the island is limited, but we do look for them, and if we could find the right investments, they would certainly get priority over investment elsewhere.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Could I call Will Matthews, please?
Thank you. Most of you will have heard of recent disturbances in Newport involving young people as young as 12 being arrested. A year ago, almost a year ago in February, I asked a question about youth services and the funding being slashed. Do you recognise the link between gutting the youth services so much they don't exist to these disturbances, and what you're going to do to rectify the situation?
Thank you for your question, Will. The link between the reduction of youth services and the specific incidents at Newport, primarily in the area of the library, is not a necessarily specific link, although I can reassure you that, having spoken with the Isle of Wight superintendent on this in the last couple of weeks, the police are being very proactive on this aspect. And I would thank the local media for the highlighting of this concern. I think there's a lot of parents on the Isle of Wight have had a talking to one or two of their young people and advise them that some things they've been doing they might want to think about. What I would say is that certainly our community safety element is fully on board with what is happening. We are in contact with the police, as I've highlighted to you, and our youth programme, which forms part of our now nationally recognised children's services programme, will take into account all of that aspect.
So just to confirm, you don't recognise the link between nowhere for young people to go, and you don't link that to young people causing nuisances?
I think you've misinterpreted what I've said. What I said is on the instance you're referring to, I am not aware that the link is specifically relating to people having nowhere to go, because clearly they've gone somewhere, which is the location they went to. But I am reassuring you that the police superintendent on the Isle of Wight and her team are fully on top of this matter, that our community safety team is aware of it, and I am very satisfied that our youth element will also take account of any fallout from the investigation. I don't at this stage know whether there's any criminal investigations involved.
Okay, so we move on to item number 4 now, which is the petition with Newport parking. Could I please call forward the petition sponsor, John McLaughlin?
Good evening, thank you. I'm also the chair of Newport Business Association, as well as the person given the opportunity to give this petition from the public of the Isle of Wight, who have over 3,000 signatures against the implementation of parking charges in Newport and up St James's Street, known as Node Hill. Also Crocker Street in Newport, where parking charges to be put, and also an evening charge. As many are fully aware, businesses are struggling in Newport, and with 20 shops prove that are empty. Retailers need all the support possible to survive. The petition clearly shows that there are shoppers using up St James's Street who come from across the island. Many of them are briefly passing through or on the way back home. Any introduction of parking charges will probably drive these customers away and risk more business decline in Newport. That situation is no good, and for anyone, so protect current Newport businesses and drop any intention of introducing parking charges on Upper St James's Street or Crocker Street. While gathering evidence, it became clear that parking is an important factor taken into account when people decide where to shop. The NBA has noticed from the government's High Street report commissioned by the Ministry of Housing and Communities and Local Government and published in December 2018, it advised that, and I quote, local authorities should review their parking provision to make sure that existing restrictions and charges are working to support accessibility to local businesses, encouraging footfall and attracting customers to town centres and high streets, unquote. We asked the Isle of Wight councils to support the High Street report recommendations and drop any intention of introducing parking charges on Upper St James's Street and Crocker Street. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
So thank you, Chair, and thank you, John, for your petition, and also thank you to all those people that I'm aware of who signed the petition. I can accept that petition on behalf of the administration. It is important that we recognise petitions of this nature, and I know you and I and the Business Association, and indeed I would reflect on to the Town and Parish Council, which Councillor Lumley and colleagues have also raised, that we're grateful for that. And I can say that the petition will be taken into account by the Cabinet as it finalises its budget considerations for full council in February. And I'll take this opportunity, because I won't repeat this, to remind both the petitioner on this petition and all of the petitions that this opportunity for petitions to come and have a contribution to the budget process has been created by the fact that the administration have gone out as early as possible to share those options with the community. Many will argue pro or con, but I think one of the positives is we have tried to engage with the community and indeed with the town and parish councils, and I hope people will appreciate that we've taken that open and transparent process.
Councillor Jones-Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't tend to speak for very long because this is a petition that's come from the public and it's the 3,000 voices that we really need to listen to today. However, as highlighted by Ms McLaughlin, you know, it's so important that we have a mix of offer in our town centres in order for them to thrive, and especially in this new era of the increase in online shopping where people have more and more choice. It used to be people used to have to come to Newport, have to go to Wight, but now they have more choice, and we need to reflect that. And I believe we have the tool already in our toolkit, which is our parking strategy. All we need to do is just get on with implementing the various elements. We're already moving forward the residents' parking zone. I'm very proud to say that Newport and Carrollsbrook Parish Council agreed on Monday to fund a post which will help move forward the amount of residents' parking zones we do need in Newport, which will add to the offer of parking that we have. So I'll let other members speak. It was a very long evening, but I really do value the amount of time that the administration has given up to talk to the businesses and hear firsthand. And I think it was a very good exchange of views, and it's great to be open like this, and hope that door's always going to be open in future. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Matt Price.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I just want to say, obviously, I'm in full support of the ethos behind this petition, and you know, myself and a cross-party group have worked with the Business Association and the administration have been listening, and I think it's also important to point out this is hopefully a long road of engagement with the business community of Newport. It's not just about parking, it's about other things as well. Newport Parish Council in particular have a number of you know, tools in our kit that we're working on, and I think it's actually a very positive step of how we're all going to work together in the future. But ultimately, I will make it obviously clear that I am opposed to the introduction of those parking charges in particular. But again, thank you to all the partners and for John and the rest of the Newport Business Association for bringing this forward. Thank you.
Councillor Brodie.
Thank you, Chair. I will contribute as well as Chair of Newport and Carrollsbrook Parish Council. Obviously, the two councils that cover the town have now spoken, but we have a very clear position of opposition to these possible charges, and I've worked with the Newport Business Association and have had a productive meeting with the leader and deputy leader of the council in recent times, so I appreciate that. The town is a watershed, frankly. We have the Shaping Newport agenda, the whole regeneration of the harbour agenda, etc. And this just seems to work against those sort of policy initiatives that we've engaged with as a parish council, and to be introducing even more parking charges into our town centre, which already provides 2/3 of all parking income to the Isle of Wight Council, seems entirely strange to me. Can I just seek clarification? Because, of course, I have tabled a motion later on, which is effectively, apart from 2 words, which I will delete if we ever get to it, pretty much what Councillor Axford proposed for the Ride petition 2 months ago. And yet it faced an extensive contra-amendment from Councillor Whitehouse. And yet I've got a sheet of paper here which has got nothing on it saying what it is. That's got 3 short sentences on. Have we all got that? Newport parking, cross-island travel. I don't know who it's from. You know, again, it's management of full council seems a bit bizarre, but it makes a statement that the Chamber requests the Cabinet reconsider the implementation of changes to parking in Newport and follow the Isle of Wight Council parking strategy to produce a local parking policy for Newport. Well, that's not a massive mile away from what I proposed later on, and if that's a proposal, you know, I'm more than happy to endorse that. I think, as I look around at my Vice Chair on the Parish Council and Matt, we work closely together across party and non on the Isle of Wight, on the Parish Council. I think we would all be comfortable with that. And as a consequence, if that's what you're proposing, is it from you, Leader?
No, it's actually the word petition thing.
It's from the word, right. I mean, if we were to support that, then there's no need. I will withdraw my motion later on. Okay, and that gets rid of some info later on. Won't be that straightforward with the law centre, I'm afraid, Laura, but with the parking we might be able to address it. Thank you.
For clarification purposes, those items, these were actually going to be put on the screen because these are the motions, these are the words of the motion, and we will be voting on yes or no. So those three sentences, at the end of the 15 minutes, which I know we're eating into, it will be that we either support, so we vote in favour, or we vote against. And that's what we will be doing, okay? But it's just so you've got that wording, because the overhead projector's not working, okay?
Sorry, Chair. I mean, you say it's the words from the petition, but it isn't. I mean, there's a large part of the petition that refers to improved signage to car parks, which is a joke in Newport, to be frank, and working with local businesses to help improve usage of the Isle of Wight Council car parks. And as somebody who has a car park, a major car park in his ward at Cotton's Bridge, as I tell Councillor Ward on a regular basis, it's 3/4 empty all the time. You know, our car parks are just not being used. I would like to see all of that in there if we're going to vote on that.
That's what we will be voting on in a few minutes, that the Chamber requests the Cabinet reconsider. The implementation of charges to parking in Newport and follow the Isle of Wight Council's parking strategy.
The wording on here is a summary of the petition, exactly the same as the Ride matter was dealt with, so that it refers, as it says, it requests the Cabinet to reconsider. It reflects the content of the petition, except it doesn't contain every word, but what you need is a sentence that reflects the decision that the Chamber is being asked to make.
Councillor, hang on. Councillor Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chair. Parking in Newport is of great concern, of course, to my residents in Newport West Ward, so that anything that happens there has a knock-on effect. I hope that the administration and the lead member in particular will be able to give me an assurance that when they are, as they will be doing, reconsidering or considering again parking charges all over the island, they will bear particularly in their mind the fact that the more parking charges that are introduced in Newport town centre, the more that will encourage drivers to park in the last free spaces before they reach the town. In practical terms, that means my ward is one big car park already, particularly Hinton Road, where the number 38 bus can't even get through, and I'm having a meeting with the senior management of Southern Vexis on Friday to discuss that. So these changes need careful consideration, and I hope the lead member will be able to give me the commitment that I seek, that he will bear that particular issue firmly in mind. Thank you.
Councillor Ian Ward.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to respond to Mr McLaughlin and the petition, and just stress and assure him that the words in the budget document were actually options and not proposals. So the feedback via the petition is very welcome, and we will take note of it. I have a more comprehensive response to Councillor Brodie's motion, but I won't give that now because we're eating into the 15 minutes.
Councillor Matt Price, did you want to come back?
Thank you, Chairman. Just with regards to what Councillor Brodie's just said, I think it's just important to point out with those words is that that it does specifically relate to producing a local parking policy for Newport. And I think that's, if I can say, Councillor Brodie, I think that's where hopefully that group can influence what happens in Newport in a policy. And then it's a tangible bit of policy that we can always work to in the future.
Okay, no one else is wishing to speak. What I'm going to do now, Councillor Brodie, is to take in mind what you've said. This is what we will be voting in favour of either for or against. That the Chamber request the Cabinet reconsider the implementation of charges to parking in Newport and follow the Isle of Wight Council parking strategy to produce a local parking policy for Newport, to improve signage and car parks and work with the local businesses to help improve usage of Isle of Wight Council car parks. Is everyone happy with that wording? Okay, so I'm willing to change. That's what we're doing. We're changing it. So could I please have your votes in favour of that motion, in that petition, those wordings? Thank you.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20.
Does that mean we're going to have a gunfight over the crossover thing then? I don't know. Just do it and see. Yeah. Again.
36.
I don't vote. Okay. Anyone against? Any abstentions? That's 36, that's carried. Well done, thank you very much. If anyone would like to leave the chamber, that's absolutely fine if you're finished. Right, so we move on to the next petition, which is item number 5, which is the cross-travel for NHS patients. Please could I call Steve Gibbs to the podium? Thank you. Welcome, Steve.
Good evening. This petition has been raised and supported by over 3,300 Isle of Wight residents who feel very angry that the Isle of Wight Council is even considering axing the free cross-solent fare scheme for residents receiving treatment for dialysis, chemotherapy and radiotherapy, as publicly announced by Claire Mosdell. We are aware that this discretionary service was originally funded by the NHS Trust and was axed by the CCG in 2006. The Council, under a different administration and seemingly out of decency and concerns for their citizens, agreed to continue the funding and have done so until now. I would like to ask Dave Stewart to explain why they are now proposing to remove this support for the NHS cancer and kidney dialysis patients at a time when they are at their vulnerable and need all the support they can get. Surely the decision should be a moral one and not a financial one. Many islanders are now becoming aware of the devastating cuts that are being made to health and social care because of the government policies, and many are struggling as austerity bites. But this service must be retained as it represents a certain death sentence for those who are unable to afford to travel. My next question is for Councillor Mosdell. Has an impact risk assessment been carried out on this proposal, and has the extra stress created by the withdrawal of the financial support at a time when patients are hard hit by other financial implications of being seriously ill being considered? As I mentioned earlier, some of the patients will decide not to travel if this funding is withdrawn because they simply cannot afford to do so, and some patients will die because of this. These are the basic factors that surely need to be considered before making final decisions. Cancer is not selective and can affect anyone, including you and me. I was recently horrified that whilst I was on an online debate on this subject, someone was quoted as saying, "If you don't like it, move off the island." Most islanders have a deep sense of compassion and fair play, as comments on the petition prove, and they are dismayed that the Council could even contemplate such a mean-spirited idea. We must give everyone dignity in our communities, and this Council should be leading the way. I noticed that our Council leader, in his recently released PR, lauds how the Council have borrowed and invested £40 million, incidentally off the island. While he claims we will return £1 million in extra revenue income to the Council, which can be spent on other services, 60,000 of that 1 million could, should and must be allocated to this service. The UK public wanted to sign our petition and are astounded that you are even thinking about considering cutting this service. What image does that give to our nation? We are being monitored from all corners of the UK to see what the outcome is tonight, and we don't need any more bad publicity for the islands. Health is a right and not a privilege. Why should patients suffer because a financial need overrides the moral need? Surely we should not be playing God with our people's health. I would say in fact and in law that health is a human right. I put this to every one of the councillors in the chamber. How would you feel if you or your family were dealing with a serious illness and was relying on a safety net, and suddenly that was taken away from you? People already must find the cost of getting to the ferry and then from the ferry to the hospital. If your income is low and the island cannot treat you, there has to be help. In a recent BBC report, it was stated that people suffering from debilitating long-term illness, such as cancer, and patients receiving dialysis treatment, suffer loss of their income with increased bills and extra travel costs. These patients on average accrue debts of $7,000, which can take many years to repay if their circumstances permit. This petition is about real people with real feelings going through difficult times who want to see actions taken by this council rather than words. You should not be penalised for having an illness. No society can call itself civilised if denied medical help because they cannot afford it. This budget cut is a life and death decision for those patients that, when you remember, councillors, when you make your decision to vote today, I ask you to support this petition and do not cut this particular funding.
So, on behalf of the administration, I accept the petition. I'm aware that I'm not required to respond to questions, but I will tell you now, if you send a written question, I will reply. You may or may not be aware, and it's not necessarily relevant, but it might help you to know that both I and Councillor Mosdell have personal family members who died from cancer, so do not think that we don't appreciate the points you're making. I thank the presenter and all those who contributed to the petition. I confirm the petition will be taken into account together with other relevant information. We will also have to wait for the results of the consultation, as this was carried out independently for us by Healthwatch, to ensure that the consultation was carried out professionally and with no bias towards the council. The decision with regard to the 60k that you referred to, and actually the decision as to whether or not we change the decision that was made back in previous time of this council, will not be made until the Cabinet has had time to read that report from Healthwatch. This is currently being prepared, so it's not due for decision until the 14th of March 2019. And we will certainly respect the recommendations that come out of that consultation, together with the petition that's been brought forward, we acknowledge that, and together with, I can assure you, very careful thought by the current administration Cabinet.
Councillor Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just acknowledge the compassion and sincerity with which that petition has been presented in what was certainly a moving address. Could I perhaps, through you, Chair, ask a number of questions either of the leader or of the portfolio holder? In most areas, it is accepted as the responsibility of the National Health Service to ensure that the patients can access the treatment that they need, and that it would be reasonable, would it not therefore be reasonable, for us to expect the NHS to be funding these costs already, rather than it falling to the council taxpayers of the island? If, and it obviously is for the Cabinet to decide, not for me, I'm not a member of the Cabinet, much to their relief, I think, if they were to decide to fund it for another year, have we had or could we get an assurance from the NHS Trust that they would pick up the tab in future years? have we yet had a copy of the NHS's response to the consultation exercise that has been carried out by Healthwatch? Because I think we should be told what the NHS view is, and that should be in the public domain. Personally, I have a great deal of sympathy, and I don't think anybody on any side of this chamber would want to think of a patient who couldn't get life-saving treatment that they needed because there was a barrier to travel costs. And I think we can proceed on the basis that there would be unanimity on that principle. The question is, whose job is to pay for it? Everywhere else in the country, it's the NHS, not the local authority. Also, I would just point out to observers and perhaps to the media who could report it, that all three of the major cross-Solent carriers, that's to say Whiteling, Red Funnel and the Hoverbit, all have special schemes for NHS patients as well, and there is information on their websites. I'm not saying that's a solution to all the problems, but where there is help, please do promote it to those who might need it so that they can access it in their time of need. Thank you.
Councillor Love.
Thank you. In response to taxpayers, it matters not to me whether if it comes from health or from this council, because those taxes are paid by us all. That's the first thing. Special schemes, I've used that special scheme. It still cost me a fortune to go across, even with a reduction, so it's not cheap. How can this council give grants to sports people at the cost of £150,000 for 75 people to benefit, when £60,000 could have been diverted from that into cancer cross-Solent patients transport, and those people who will benefit from this year could be asked as part of that to raise funds from that gift from this council to them in order to support that scheme. It's inconceivable. What comes first? Grants to people, whilst I welcome, and support people from sports societies, giving £150,000 to sports, which this council talks about pride, whilst people's lives are at risk, is inconceivable. You cannot give £150,000 for that and take away £60,000, which enables hundreds of people to live, and have access to. It's not conceivable. So I would say that you have the power before you to rescind the previous action and allow 60,000 to go forward from other savings, as this gentleman up here has described, and there are still other options to do that. People are being emotionally wrecked because of this, okay? And whilst I accept that there are other people here who have, a relationship with cancer, it affects almost the entire island. So we can do that now and put people out of their misery right here tonight. We have the power to do that if we want to, and it should be done.
Councillor Mosdale.
Thank you. We will, of course, accept the petition, but we do have to wait for the results of the consultation, because we asked independently for Healthwatch to prepare that consultation to ensure that it was carried out professionally. The decision with this 60k will be made by the Cabinet and with that consultation. We had to bring this up and to make sure that we went to consultation and look at it so that we as a Cabinet were in a position that if we carried on funding this 60,000, that we make sure that we present it in a way to the NHS that we secure ourselves as a council from any judicial review. At the moment, this 60,000 will cover people who are going for radiotherapy or chemotherapy, but it doesn't cover things like immunotherapy. We literally give this 60,000 to the NHS and they manage it. So if we carry on funding it, we need to ensure that we as a council have made sure that we have a legal agreement with the NHS, that it is managed in such a way that we have no comeback to us. Sadly, this 60,000 really is a drop in the ocean when it comes to funding for health travel. And I'm working closely with our MP, the NHS Trust and the Clinical and Commissioning Group to ensure that we look at how future funding could be provided to help with all health travel. For example, when my daughter was 2 years old, she had to have an emergency operation in Southampton. I was on a low income at the time, but not on actually any benefits. We were in Southampton for a week in intensive care. When she'd had the operation, it was over, you could go home now. I had a week with no income coming in from my job, and it was just get on with it. No help with any travel. If we're going to look at health travel, we need to look at it as a whole. We can't just look at cancer travel. We need to ensure this. I think the data's coming out about 1.3 million we would need. So that's when we need to work with the Trust and the CCG and the MP to get some government funding to cover this. At the moment, if you lived on the Scilly Isles, you literally would only pay £5 towards your travel, whatever your gut diagnosis. It's not means tested. So why are we any different? We need to put our heads above the parapet with this consultation, take this to Cabinet and say to the NHS, you need to look at this properly. You know, 60,000 is nothing out of the 1.3 million that is need to make sure that health travel is covered properly. There is some support for NHS travel for people on low incomes, and the ferry operators do offer discounts. We work closely with the cross-Solent patient experience to have information provided to help people understand what can be done to assist them. However, as I am incredibly acutely aware, having travelled with my father when he was having radiotherapy, this journey is not just about the financial difficulties. This is about the lack of understanding that it seems that the NHS and the CCG, and also many people, until you've done that journey, you have no idea how difficult it can be. We need to make sure that people are seriously ill, are looked after, not just financially, but emotionally when they do that journey. So if it seems difficult that we have taken this out to public consultation, that public consultation, if carried out properly, gives weight for us as a council for £60,000 to say to the NHS, we might carry on doing this for a year, but these are the strings that are attached. You look at the residents of this island and you say, you fund this properly. We are an island and we need to be treated like the Scilly Islands.
I'm aware we've only got 4 minutes left. Councillor Lilly, please.
I totally support that we obviously, through consultation, need to get to everything that Councillor Modsdale has said. I support, but I think that we should do it slightly differently by saying in that discussion that we will not withdraw that funding until we've got a longer term solution. And I think therefore we should tonight, and I'll be supporting or voting for the petition, to say, yes, we need to get responsibility from the NHS. We need to be accepted by our government as an island, and that piece of water is the most expensive piece of water to actually cross probably in the world. And we need to actually recognise, but we do it by supporting our people and saying that 60,000 will stay at least for the next 12 months until we get a commitment to support the most vulnerable and the people that are ill on this island.
Councillor Julie Jones-Evans.
Yes, I support the motion. We must not withdraw this at this particular time until we have a plan B, and yes, we must hold the NHS to account, and as Councillor Moss does, I agree, look at the wider issue here and everyone else that needs the support too. And thirdly, this goes to the heart really of Councillor Andre's motion, really, doesn't it? That we need to get that fair funding from government. This is just highlights it in neon lights as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Councillor Brodie, final say, and then we move to the vote.
Well, I'm just asking a question. It's the same one as the last one. We have a petition with, in the second paragraph of our agenda, which I haven't counted all the words, but it must be around about 40 words, and yet we've got an alternative on this mysterious piece of paper that nobody's admitting to producing. What are we actually going to be voting on? I mean, certainly from my point of view, Chair, I mean, I agree entirely with Chris Whitehouse. This is an NHS responsibility. But I will say, after 9 years of having a government MP on the Isle of Wight, I'm getting a bit fed up with the statement that our MP's working with government, etc., and the council to try and achieve things for the Isle of Wight, because it never happens, and it's becoming a bit of a bore. But anyway, can we just have clarification as to that? I would suggest, Chair, you might want to ask the petitioner whether he would be happy with the mysterious paragraph or whether he would rather we voted on the statement on his petition. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Brodie, I will read out as of the petition, and the reason why it has to be reworded is because this is a Cabinet decision. We can accept the motion, we can vote, but the decision is made by Cabinet. So that's why there is rewording. But I will do my best to encompass what the petition says. So, that the Chamber requests the Cabinet to reconsider the proposal to cut the £60,000 funding for cross-Solent travel scheme for NHS patients who suffer from dialysis, chemotherapy and radiotherapy be withdrawn and the funding be continued and kept the same level and within the Council budget. That's what we're voting on, okay?
Probably didn't.
All right, okay.
It doesn't quite make sense, but
it doesn't, yeah. Okay, so that's what we're voting on, for or against. What's the problem?
So, from what you're saying, then has the cabinet already made a decision then?
No.
So, if the cabinet hasn't made a decision, why are you worried about voting on something that's been a cabinet decision?
It's a financial, it is a cabinet. Anyway, right, I'm moving to the vote. I'm not messing around. We've got a lot to deal with. What? Can we have name vote? Need four people to stand.
Well, what happens if you can't stand? No,
Okay. Okay. Well, more than 4 people, 6, 7 people have indicated. It will be a named vote, right? Okay, so this the petition requests the proposal to cut the £60,000 funding cross-Solent travel scheme NHS persons for. That's what we're voting on. All those in favour of supporting the petition, please show.
Councillor Abraham, Councillor Axford, Councillor Bertie, Councillor Beston, Councillor Brading, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Churchman, Councillor Hastings, Councillor Hobart, Councillor Hutchinson, Councillor Kilpatrick, Councillor Mosdell, Councillor Merwill, Councillor Nicholson, Councillor Outlaw, Councillor Peace, Councillor Perks, Councillor Price, Councillor Quirk, Councillor Tyndall, Councillor Ward, Councillor Whittle, Councillor Whitehouse, Councillor Andre, Councillor Downer, Councillor Fuller, Councillor Howe, Councillor Stevens, Councillor Jones-Evans, Councillor Love, Councillor Lilly, Councillor Brodie, Councillor Barry, Councillor Garrett, Councillor Cameron, and Councillor Stewart, and Councillor PC Wilcox.
Yes. Are there any abstentions? Anyone against? Wouldn't have thought so. Okay, that's carried 37, unanimous. Well done, thank you very much. Okay, so we move on to item 6, which is the petition for the Law Centre funding cuts. So could I call, please, Colleen Brannan? Thank you.
Hello. Do I just start talking? Okay. I recognise that the Council is intent on entering a tendering process for the provision of relevant services. I am realistic, and I note the recent press release from the Council. As such, this petition is not about getting the Council to abandon this process, but to recognise the work that is currently undertaken and which should be maintained for the benefit of island residents and for the financial good of the Isle of Wight Council. I note the motion submitted by Councillor Brodie. I do not apologise for the fact that the Law Centre appears twice on this evening's agenda, even though we're in a rush. This indicates its importance. In addition, the fact there is a motion before you means you have the opportunity to formally vote to recognise this importance. The Law Centre is perhaps a body not known by the majority of islanders, but it is highly valued by all those that it's helped over the last 15 years. These include my parents. My mum was a manager of a home care company, and my dad was an engineer for over 30 years, until one day, without warning, in her mid-30s, my mum suffered a life-changing stroke. My dad was forced to give up work to care for her, and if it hadn't been for the timely, specialist and free help offered by the Law Centre, we most certainly would have lost our home. When out collecting signatures for the petition, I heard many similar stories from others. A lady from Cowes told me, "After the CAB was unable to help me, I got an appointment with the Law Centre and years of debt problems were dealt with almost immediately. I was helped with my PIP tribunal, which was successful. Thanks to the Law Centre, my debt is managed, my PIP restored, and I have kept my home and my sanity." Countless people have contacted me from across the island with stories such as these. But this is not a personal issue. In 2017, the Law Centre secured over £140,000 worth of benefit payments and dealt with 18 mortgage repossession claims, 111 rent repossession claims, 3 homelessness reviews, 18 bankruptcies, 142 debt relief orders, 2 administration orders and 64 eviction warrants, for which the Law Centre has a 98% success rate in stopping. The Law Centre prevents crisis from becoming catastrophe. Last year, the Isle of Wight Council spent £1.4 million on temporary accommodation. Without an organisation delivering the very specialist work of the Law Centre, it's easy to see how this figure could drastically rise. The average cost to a local authority when accepting an individual or family as homeless, calculated in 2012, is between £24,000 and £30,000. Even when using the 2012 figures and basing the maths on eviction warrants only, the Law Centre saved the Isle of Wight Council between £1.5 and £1.9 million in 2017. Considering the rise in evictions and homelessness in areas across the country where universal credit has been rolled out, and the fact that these reforms are due to be fully implemented on the island in due course, it would seem questionable to risk island services that are proven to prevent homelessness. The Law Centre is plainly valuable, not just to the people it helps, but also in pure financial terms to the Isle of Wight Council. It is key that the Law Centre does not simply signpost people to other relevant organisations. It does the work required to help people, because its objectives are outcome-based. It does not just give advice or tell people where to go. It offers more than advice, information and guidance. It advocates on behalf of its clients because it has the specialist skill set and experience to do so. It is an impartial, confidential specialist service, factors that are vital to its work and which would be very difficult to secure in other circumstances. It could not, for example, be brought into County Hall and remain entirely impartial and confidential. In passing, I note there is no other body on the island which undertakes this work or which is able to undertake this work due to its specialist nature. Furthermore, no such body exists nearby on the mainland that could. As Councillor Brodie notes in his motion, the island is a legal aid desert. I recognise the administration have a responsibility to the island taxpayer to consider the impact of any changes, both in financial terms and to service delivery, especially where the impact of those changes will inevitably result in higher costs to the council and the loss of vital services that islanders rely on when experiencing hardship. So I would ask that in going forward, the council set parameters which will ensure the work currently done is not lost. I support the approach suggested in the motion put forward by Councillor Brodie and would also ask that the tender should be constructed so as to ensure that the work outlined above is done to the same level or better. Financially, we are in difficult times, so it is fair to comment that if actions are being taken on the face of it plainly seem to generate extra cost, whether this be the cost of the tendering process or £1.5 million in additional cost to the future homeless budget, this is something that should plainly be questioned. Thank you.
Just a point of order, Chair, as those occasions arise, sometimes I'm going to agree with Councillor Brodie here. I'm just a little confused. I certainly want to accept the petition on behalf of the administration, that goes without saying. The piece of paper in front of me asks the request that the Cabinet abandon plans to cut funding to the Law Centre. I have some concerns with those words because actually there's a whole, and actually the petitioner who led herself made the point, there's a whole process we have to follow quite properly around tendering. And I don't think it's the spirit of Councillor Brodie's motion or this petition that we should just abandon that process. I think what we're being asked is to reconsider options on the law centre to make sure that we follow that option, but we don't want to exclude the law centre because we haven't followed the tendering process. We could shoot ourselves in the foot. So I just seek some clarification. While you're thinking about that, Chair, can I just thank the presenter? And I made a note of some of the words you used because I think the spirit of what you were saying was to ask us, notwithstanding our process, to seriously consider the benefits that the law centre brings, and that when we do the tendering process and look for best value, which we must do, that we take account of the good work. You don't have to reply. I think if that's where we're going. We have to also take in other information, and I need to remind officers of the need that we follow our procurement process and deliver best value, because we leave ourselves exposed to judicial review if we haven't done so. So what I'm saying is, if I've got the spirit right, that what actually is being asked for here is for the Cabinet, in its deliberations, to reconsider the option that's in there regarding the law centre, along with best value in any tendering process. I'm comfortable to vote for this. If that's not explicit, I shall vote against, but because I don't want to undermine any process. Is that clear to you? It's important it's clear to you.
It is.
And would you agree with me or not? You don't have to.
The thing that's really important is the Law Centre offers very specialist services that don't necessarily come under the advice, guidance and information remit very easily, and that's the thing. I mean, I don't understand how these things work very well, but perhaps the tendering process stream could be split. I don't know.
But in a nutshell, you'd like the Cabinet to consider what you've said as we make that decision. Am I right?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. We've clarified it. Don't know whether that's with the rules, but that's helpful. Councillor Brodie, have you got a problem with my comments?
Councillor Brodie, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. And I mean, knowing how things work, and we've got to remember that people who put petitions together don't necessarily know the wording of it, etc. You know, I haven't, briefed Mrs. Brannan on how to phrase a petition or anything like that. I hardly know her. What I understand largely what happens, I wouldn't say all of it because it's not always made obvious to opposition members, to be honest, but I put a motion in later because I understand that you have to go through a procurement process occasionally at the very least, and there hasn't been one for a while. But what my motion later on, which again Councillor Whitehouse has helpfully in inverted commas tried to change entirely, which I hope we would oppose, attempts to address that issue, because the CAB and Age UK might be happy to be in County Hall as part of information, advice and guidance, and that's for their trustees. Particularly, I used to be a CAB trustee and I would have been against that massively. I think it's a major mistake. I've got residents who will not go to CAB anymore because it's in County Hall. And the Law Centre is another organisation that has to be outside County Hall, that provides very specialist advice, and frankly is incapable of tendering as it's advertised. I got from the Assistant Chief Executive this morning a copy of the advert for the tender, and it cannot tender for that at all, because it doesn't do all the things that are in the tender advert. And I think they're being excluded from that. And I got a trail of the decision making about this. And there was a report some time ago when the Cabinet, I think it was summer 17, but the entire timeline of everything was officer driven. And that concerned me as well, that there didn't seem to be much administration involvement in this decision making. So what I would suggest to Mrs. Brannan is that she's presented a petition that I would suggest to you, Dave, that you're welcomed anyway, but I would hope that we can approve something like my motion either now or later on. Now, I know I've put a lot of flannel in at the start, because I like to give it a bit, I'm always trying to contextualise things. And then, of course, then we've got the problem of Chris's amendment, you know what I mean? Well, I wish he'd just get rid of that, frankly, you know, but I know that's not going to happen. But anyway, I don't know if that helps, Chair, and lead with the council, but I do think I was trying, and you know, Dave, I shared this with you some weeks ago and asked you for your support. I don't know if I've got it, but I was trying to give our law centre on the island a chance of being able to continue, rather than what I think is going to happen. We're going to end up with some mainland organisation like the U Trust coming in and taking over all IAG services and running everything out of County Hall. And I tell you what, my residents in one of the most deprived wards on the island will not go near it, because they see County Hall as the oppressor, not the helper. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. Clearly there's a great deal of passion on this subject, and we do need to take some dispassionate decisions. Fortunately, it's a decision that will ultimately be taken after a proper lawful procurement process by the Cabinet, so I have very little influence over it. What I would say, though, it's untrue that the Law Centre cannot apply for this tender, just because it doesn't itself provide all the services that we're looking to provide to islanders. Indeed, it could do so in partnership with another organisation. So factually, that's not quite true. Other than that, I share a lot of sympathy with Councillor Brodie's sentiment on these issues. In terms of the constitutional conundrum that the chair and monitoring officer are trying to deal with, I haven't got the Constitution open in front of me because I can't get the link to work, but my recollection of the Constitution in regard to petitions is that we have a 15-minute debate and then Chamber decides what to do. We have a clear proposal from the Leader of the Council that the Chamber should decide to accept this petition and refer it to the Cabinet. I don't see what all the worry is about the detailed wording. We do not have to reflect the wording of the petition. It's a purely procedural facility as to what we're going to do, and that we've had a proposal from the Leader of the Council, which, I mean, I don't know where that sheet of paper came from, but I think in everybody's interests, the simpler you keep that, the better. We don't have to reflect the provision of the petition in that. That's what the Cabinet are going to consider as and when they get round to it at their future meeting, which I'm sure will be pretty promptly after the consultation is analysed. I hope those remarks are helpful to the Chair and to the monitoring officer.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly.
I think it's important to emphasise the core things from the petitioner, which was put excellently, and also from Councillor Brodie, and an element from Councillor Whitehouse, in the sense that there are many people who get into difficulties. You have a lot of people in private housing now, working families, who suddenly are given very short notice to actually lose their homes. I've had families in my ward on this basis, and they literally have never really used lawyers other than for leases or something. They are really feel abandoned, and they actually need that independent, flexible help that can actually help within that. And we have many people of that. There's recently a big article in newspapers about large private landlords that bought up a lot of property when it was very lucrative, who are now selling. There was one big landlord that got rid of 1,500 notices to families. This was off the island, but just like that after Christmas, and put people in desperate. We need people to have that legal advice. There's also many people, residents that come that have difficulty, get into difficulty, and cannot pay their council tax. And again, they feel very frightened to come to the council of that, and they need that independent help. So we need to find ways of keeping this expertise. I am totally against having bust-in expertise coming from the mainland. We need to have our own expertise on this island, and I urge, I don't know all the ins and outs, but I do urge the Cabinet to seriously make sure that our people have the best professional help to get them out of the crisis they're in. So that's why I want, and I will be voting to make sure that we don't abandon any service.
Councillor Merwell.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to reiterate, because there have been several stories going around in the media that we are cutting the service. We are not cutting the service, but through the procurement process, all acceptable tenders will be considered without prejudice. And the Law Centre is obviously open to welcome to offer a tender by itself or with other parties as well, if it can't provide everything that is required. It is the duty of all the members that we receive the best value for the residents of the island. Hence, as this contract and other contracts that have come up, which for years have just been put to one side and say, we've always used this provider, it doesn't provide the best value for the island residents. We are changing that, so we do ensure that we do get that. I think we need to make sure the cost is right, but also that we don't lose the quality as well. So the island residents will receive the same quality of assistance that they get at the moment, but at the right price. But we can't just say we just use one user. We have to use the best user and most efficient user. And it's not just for this, but for all other areas within the council. That's something that's been lacking over the years from administrations before, whatever colour they were. So, thank you.
We've got 2 more minutes. Is there anyone wishing to speak? Councillor Ian Stevens.
I wasn't going to speak, but I think that there's no greater sign of efficiency than a centre that's run over the years and brought a great deal of assistance to this authority and to the residents of the Isle of Wight. The stats are there for anyone to see. If you go and put things out to tender, you might well end up with the unknown, which could actually end up costing more money and more despair for our residents. So I'll be supporting the petition. Thank you.
Councillor Paul Bertie.
Sorry. I just need some clarification. This piece of paper that we're going to be voting on says that the Cabinet requests the Cabinet abandons plans to cut funding. But from what I've just heard from Councillor Merwell here, there is no plan to cut funding. So therefore we can't vote on this particular sentence that's on this piece of paper.
Can you bear with me, please, because we need to look at the wording in the original petitions.
On a point of order, Chair, we don't need to look at the wording in the original petition. It's a procedural motion. The leader has made a proposal to full council that this petition stand referred to Cabinet. That's the end of the matter, full stop.
So, Chair, my point of order that I mentioned to you was just that. I am very happy, and I'm sure the Cabinet will be, that if we vote to refer this matter to the Cabinet for consideration, we will be able to support the principles in the motion, in the petition. We won't be able to support the word abandon because, for the reasons that have rightly been pointed out, we may be undermining our own procurement process, and we shouldn't do that. So if everybody in practical terms understands we're voting to refer this to Cabinet for reconsideration, because we've got rightly in the motion the words don't cut, reject plans, which we're acknowledging, I'm happy to support it. I can't support abandon.
Chair, on a point of order, a proposal has been made by a member in the chamber. Can I propose we go straight to the vote?
Councillor Whitehouse, the usual debate rules don't apply to petitions, so we're just looking at the petition rules, but the usual debate rules don't apply. Yes, but the importance of looking at the petition is that obviously those who've signed the petition, which has brought it here, have signed it on a particular basis. So
okay. Hang on, I've made a decision because we've got a heck of an agenda, and my decision as the chairman is that the Chamber requests the Cabinet reconsiders plans to cut funding to the Law Centre. That is what we are voting on. All those in favour? The wording is the Chamber requests the Cabinet reconsiders plans to cut funding to the Law Centre. Well then, if you can't agree with that, then you vote against that. That is what we're voting on, because that is the wording on the petition. It's a petition, so it's different from motions. Councillor Brodie.
Can I try and be helpful? And it may not be what everybody wants to hear, I'm afraid, but I am aware of the procurement processes to some extent. Can I formally propose that the wording is, that we note the petition, but I forget the opening words on that sheet of paper, that the Chamber requests the Cabinet to reconsider the procurement process for the Law Centre service on the Isle of Wight. Come on. Reconsider.
I second that.
But it's a formal motion, Chair.
You deal with White House then.
So, thank you for that, Jeff. Sometimes we have to be practical and not always follow the tight rules. I think what we can do here is say that the Cabinet will process that's being in relation to the Law Centre and related to it. That doesn't mean we're going to change it. It just means we're going to consider it. And on that basis, I'm comfortable. Beyond that, I can't. We may not have the power to actually do anything about it, of course. Oh, I see. Yeah, my colleague's rightly advising me that we can't reconsider a procurement process, but I think we can reconsider the approach to the funding of the Law Centre, which is why I said the initial one, which is. Councillor Brodie, are you happy that we accept that the petition is referred to Cabinet for consideration? That the petition is referred to Cabinet for consideration?
Told by an experienced member of the Audit Committee and former chair that this council has a right to waive its procurement procedures in relation to something like this. Apparently it does. Now, I don't know. As I've famously said, I'd rather watch paint dry than being on the Audit Committee. You know, and it's,
They have
waivers all the time.
Councillor Barry?
I'm not sure of the exact amount we're talking about here, but I'm sure that larger amounts have been given waivers by the Audit Committee, or it's been reported to the Audit Committee that waivers, and the Chairman of bear me out on this, larger than the sum I think we're talking about now, on the grounds of continuity, lack of other providers on the island, etc., etc. And I think with a little bit of research, you could come up with a very good reason to grant a waiver to the law.
Right. I didn't know what... Okay, right. This is what we're voting on. All those in favour? No, the debate had ended. I was just allowing you to speak. Okay, Law Centre. That the Chamber requests the Cabinet review the funding to the Law Centre. All those in favour, please show. That the Chamber requests the Cabinet review the funding of the Law Centre. We're trying to work with what was written in the original petition.
Sorry, Jeff.
I'm moving to the vote now. I'm moving to the vote. All those in favour that the Chamber request... Is there 4 people that would like to indicate that they wish to have the vote? Okay, thank you. Named vote. The wording is that the Chamber requests the Cabinet review their funding to the Law Centre. All those in favour?
Councillor Axford, Councillor Bertie, Councillor Beston, Councillor Brading, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Churchman, Councillor Hastings, Councillor Hobart, Councillor Kilpatrick, Councillor Mosdell, Councillor Merwill, Councillor Nicholson, Councillor Outlaw, Councillor Peace, Councillor Perks, Councillor Price, Councillor Quirk, Councillor Tyndall, Councillor Ward, Councillor Whittle, Councillor Whitehouse, Councillor Downer, Councillor Fuller, Councillor Howe, Councillor Stevens, Councillor Jones-Evans, Councillor Love, Councillor Lilly, Councillor Brodie, Councillor Barry, Councillor Garrett, Councillor Cameron, Councillor Stewart and Councillor E.C. Wilcox.
Are there anyone against? Any abstentions? Oh, hang on, one against.
Councillor
Hutchinson. Are there any abstentions, please? What did we get then, Jen? 36, please. That's 35 in favour, that's carried. Thank you, Law Centre. If anyone wishes to leave, please do so, but if you could do it quietly so that we can carry on, please. Item 7 on the agenda was the Chairman's Chairman's whatever, official announcements. I did send them earlier. Yeah, I forgot what I was doing. Okay, so they were sent out. Item 8, Leaders' Report, and that's to receive the Leaders' Update and Report. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I must start with an apology to full council. I did endeavour to keep this report brief, but the sheer number of things that have been happening, and in particular the successes that I feel this council is achieving in areas like children's services and all the other areas that are outlined in the report, prevented me from not sharing with members as much of that good news as I could. The report is there. I only have one other thing to do. Isle of Wight Radio, you may recall at Christmas, ran a campaign supported by our early years children's team to provide toys for over 3,000 island children who may otherwise not have had a toy at Christmas. Now, I found myself attending Isle of Wight Radio to help, or supervise perhaps is a better word, some of the wrapping of the presents. And in the process, I was given a present by Isle of Wight Radio to deal with, on the understanding that if I wore this present, Isle of Wight Radio would double their efforts next year. And so I took them up on the offer, and then thought to myself, well, it is a fully kitted toy SAS outfit that may not be fully appreciated by the council, but how do you wear that? So I'm now officially able to wear the outfit, if I can get it on. Just for the record, I did wear the outfit, but it's safely in the box, so we don't have the abuse. And what I actually intend to do, if Lauren, who's from Isle of Wight Radio, would come forward, I'm going to give you this back, Lauren, and be the first gift for next year's Isle of Wight Radio appeal, and I will ask anybody living with So I just want to thank Isle of Wight Radio, and I do want to thank our early years team as well. And the only other thing I think I will do, which is in the report, but I think Councillor Brady can probably articulate it far better than I, is just to put a highlight onto this children's services result. Would you mind just dealing with that, Councillor Brady?
Thank you, Leader. I think it's appropriate, well, we're all here this evening, just to go on record giving my personal thanks on behalf of all of us, really, to our fantastic children's services team. You know, the Ofsted report we've just received, which puts us good in every single area, puts us in the top 20% nationally now, and we were now in a position to help other authorities. Bear in mind, this has been a 6-year journey. From 2012, we were rated inadequate. To get a rating good in every area, we mustn't underplay exactly how strong that is. Some of the comments that were made around our team, forward-thinking, well-led, and it was really child-centred around, the child was at the centre of everything that we do. And the team have been congratulated, continue to be congratulated. I've got to say thank you to Steve, Mr. Director of Children's Services. I'm very grateful that to have Steve to work alongside with Hampshire. But we've got some great internal officers as well, and the way we've nurtured our staff as well as the service they deliver, we've got some really strong players in our team now, and they lead. But one thing I said to the Officer Inspector myself at the end of my interview was I hope that the team show you what they do and tell you how proud they are to do what they do for the children of the island. And that came across loud and clear in the report, that the social workers and all the team, they spoke so eloquently about what they do and proudly what they do for the children of the island. And it's great that we got a result. We were almost disappointed that we didn't get outstanding in some areas, but let's not rest on our laurels. We're going for outstanding now. We're good in every area. There are areas to work on, as there are in all Ofsted reports, and I'm grateful to the whole team. I think the whole chamber should put on record its gratitude to the whole Children's Services team of the Isle of Wight Council. Be proud of what we've got.
Can I just remind you, this is questions to the leader. I'm not quite sure what that was about. Okay, right, okay. He was using up the leader's 5 minutes, apparently. Right, okay, so questions to the leader, and I have one from John Nicholson.
Thank you, Chairman. Leader,
are you aware that it's not just children's services that are in the highlight? There's been a recent announcement that our adult social care department, led by Dr. Carol Tozer, is one of only 9 local authorities to be shortlisted for an award through the Local Government Chronicle for health and social care. And the other nominees are no small players. Glasgow, Croydon, Lancashire, with far, far bigger resources than we have. And I think it's just remarkable and a testament to the leadership that we have in adult social care and the Cabinet member that we've achieved such a remarkable accolade of nomination to this award in such a short time.
So thank you for your question. Yes, I am aware. I'm very grateful and appreciative of the work that our adult social care do for the Isle of Wight. The unfortunate thing about it is I've now set Councillor Mosdell a task, if you like, an objective, as she's so good, that she's now got to make this a centre of excellence for the country. I'm reassured by the Director that's an achievable objective, and I think between the two of them, I can actually see us coming back here and celebrating that level of success. They work hard, the team work hard, and although we will, I'm sure, debate financial aspects, I cannot fault the level of care given by our staff and the commitment, and it goes right through that organisation. So I think it's nice, as I said at the start of my report, to be able to sit here and present to you a report with 2 outstanding area of works, and let's not forget, there are statutory requirements. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Lilly.
Wish to ask a question around item 12, protection of our environment. Is the Isle of Wight Council looking at the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change October 2018 report, and does the Council going to abide by the carbon emission parameters and the Council to be carbon neutral by 2030?
So thank you for your question. I think you were relating to the clean air zones, and that's been very topical in the news actually in the last 24 hours. As you know, we were initially confronted with a proposal by Southampton City Council that they weren't going to put a £100 bill on every heavy goods vehicle that didn't make the level of requirement. And unfortunately, the impact of that on the island economy would have been very, very substantial indeed. I think the principle that we should have a clean air zone that meets the national requirement, no council will ultimately be able to avoid. What we need to do is balance that with protecting our economy and making sure that jobs are not damaged in the process. The good news on that point is I wrote a letter to the leader of Southampton Council and to the Minister, and received a letter back from the Minister acknowledging that whilst the clean air zone priority and policy was there, it was not intended to undermine the economies of places like the island. So we're in a balanced approach. The good news also is I spoke with the leader of Southampton Council, who I think are slightly reflecting on the way in which they're going to achieve that objective. And the end of that was we ended up with an agreement we ought to deal with Southampton and ourselves on our whole tourist offer, because we're such a fantastic place with our areas of outstanding natural beauty, our beaches, which Southampton don't have, and then their cinemas and other things which they do. So I think a long answer to a short question is yes, in principle, we fully support the climate principles, but at the same time, we are going to make sure we look after our island economy and our jobs for our young people.
Councillor Love.
Thank you. Leader, 3,000 presents is to be commended. It really is to be commended. But it also highlights the levels of poverty that still exist on this island. Will you make a statement which encourages working with the partnerships and voluntary agencies on this island that will move us forward and to address that poverty?
Absolutely. One of the focuses of the Health and Wellbeing Board is deprivation. One of the locations of deprivation that we're focused on is Newport, because it is in the top 10% in the country. The other one that we will then be focusing on is Ride, which sits in a similar place. So I'm happy to say that one of our focuses in it overall is to tackle deprivation for our young people. And that doesn't apply everywhere, and many look after themselves, but we have made that one of our commitments through the Health and Wellbeing Board.
No more questions to the leader? Oh, okay. Councillor Reg Barry.
Will there be the same level of security for all council meetings now?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure which bit of the report that's in.
Councillor Tig Outlaw.
Will the leader make a statement on the improvements already delivered on the waste management services of the Isle of Wight, with particular reference to recycling, reduction and reuse?
So thank you for that. If members aren't already aware, the Isle of Wight, through its proactive approach to recycling of waste, has found itself achieving results which have taken us above the national target, to the extent that the Under-Secretary of State has now written to me to ask two things. One, how do we do it? And two, can we engage with her officers in order to share that good practice? Actually, beyond that, not only have we achieved well with our recycling to date, but I am going to arrange for members across the chamber to be able at the appropriate time to visit the new recycling centre at Forest Road, which Councillor Merwell has been driving hard, because having been up there now myself, to see that we're going to have 90% of our household waste dealt with through that processor and earning income and putting energy into our system is fantastic. And I think we are achieving very well. There are places in Hampshire that can't believe you can actually put food waste into a little bin and take it away. So I think we are doing extremely well, and I will keep the council informed of progress, as I'm sure Councillor Merwell will.
Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. At the risk of sounding slightly parochial, which is why I held back to see if other members might want to come in, I want to refer to the comments that the leader makes on the Camp Hill site. It is great that due diligence is taking place, and I'm looking forward, I hope, to a briefing on that, both through this place and from the Office of the Member of Parliament. There will be a lot of people on those estates who will be wanting to know how much that due diligence work will go towards not just acquiring sites for new buildings, but to actually ensure that the infrastructure on those estates, the roads, the street lighting, the sewers, everything on there which have suffered over the last 30 years because of the way they were sold off in the 1980s, they will be very keen to know that the leader is doing his very best to make sure that the boundaries of that due diligence are being pushed as far as possible to ensure that we get some upgrading around the Camp Hill site, the Parkhurst site, the Albany site as well.
So thank you for your question. The good news on the Camp Hill site is that through the work of our MP most recently, and I know the Chief Executive is engaged with various people that are behind that, we are being offered Camp Hill site. Yes, we were offered it some time ago, because I can recall Councillor Hutchinson going along and getting the same message. And for some reason, the government's a bit tucked up at the moment. But the bottom line is I think we are going to be offered it. The reason the due diligence is so important is actually exactly what you've said. We don't know what sits underneath that site. We don't know what risks as well as benefits we are. We do know that it's a large site will help us meet our housing needs, particularly affordable housing, and is not going to be, I don't think, voted against in terms of it's a safe site. But I absolutely agree with you. The people that live there now, the infrastructure, because you've got major parking problems up there, I'm very aware of, and we've got some areas, well, the junction there to be dealt with. I think that has to be seen in the round. And so what we will be doing is, once we are in a position to we can say, yes, we're happy to secure the site and take it, we will be making sure that our development plans include dealing with the roads and the houses that are there, because if I lived on that, I would want that reassurance. So I can assure you, as far as I can control it at the moment, that is our intention.
Councillor Whitehouse.
Does the Leader of the Council share my delight that Her Majesty's Government has just survived its vote of no confidence?
Okay, can we move on, Councillor Barry?
Sorry, Chair, did you want me to respond on the heading of Brexit?
This comes under 12, environment. You'll be aware of the wage energy firm that this council gave, or lent, how much? £1.something million to? Can you give us an update of when we're going to get that £1 million back?
I can't tell you when we're going to get the £1 million back, because the current situation with that energy company is, and this is PTEC, I think you're referring to. I won't try and pronounce the acronym in detail. In terms of it being an investment by this council, this was an investment to provide income through tidal energy off St Catherine's, and we were able to secure at that time agreement and approval from the appropriate authorities to run it as a test bed, because on the basis that the tide always comes in and always goes out, it's always going to provide you with a very reliable source of energy. That was fine. However, at that time, when they were developing the project, the government subsidies towards energy of that type were quite substantial. That has changed, and it is just, as far as I understand it at the moment, not viable for companies to put prototypes on the test bed and get the return on their investment. So we're currently looking at that. We have the investment. We know that our partners in that are keen to progress it, but I think it's about timing. So whilst I don't think we've lost the money, I think we're into a situation where we need to wait till the climate, don't mind the pun, the climate is right.
I know the tide comes in and out. I already know that, but thanks for letting me know, just in case I'd forgot. But we lent £1 million to them, which we were supposed to be getting back in 1919. That was the deal. I never voted for it, but that was a deal of the then Conservative administration. That million, you know as well as I do, not a stone has turned down on that site. It had planning permission, what, 4 years ago, 5 years ago? They had planning permission, very controversial planning permission. They had the planning permission. I want to know, it's obvious it ain't going to happen. I want to know what you're doing to get the £1 million back. And
we don't have supplementary questions, Councillor Barry.
I just asked a question, when are we getting it back? Never mind about it's going to be done as grants coming from government, the tide's coming in and out. I'm not interested in that. I want to know when we're going to...
Councillor Hastings, this is the final question.
Thank you, Chairman. Leader, do you consider that the Cabinet on the Road has been successful, and if so, will you be continuing the format?
I think it's been very successful. Probably, if I dare say it, to the slight displeasure of some of our officers who've had to work very hard in order to facilitate the process. For members who aren't aware, we will, by the end of this term, that is this year, have gone to every town and parish council on the Isle of Wight and invited them to a meeting. It's had two successes. First of all, the Cabinet has put itself available to ask questions and take questions and answers from town and parish councils, and I know Councillor Brodie's Newport and Carisbrooke Town and Parish Council have benefited already. But also, beyond the Cabinet publicly, which we've run, and people have been able to come along and ask questions. The last one I recall was at Cowes. In the private meetings that we have with the Town and Parish Council, we as a Cabinet have been able to find out what their issues and concerns are. And they definitely differ, depending on whether you're from Cowes or from Ryde or from Newport or whatever. And one of the benefits of that is because we're an Isle of Wight council, we're able to take the round picture into context. So I think it's been very good. By the time we get to May, we will have attended everywhere. I think West Wight's in our sites, and some of the Middle Wight Town and Parish Councils are coming here in February. I think it's been very successful, and I shall certainly be looking to repeat that next year.
I now propose we move to a break for 8 minutes. That's 8, not 10, 8 minutes, So I will be starting at just before 8 o'clock this evening. Thank you very much. See you in a minute.